this is Bishop Pelt, and this is Pelt's Pelt Talk. And today I'm so honored to be joined with a great cadre of men to hopefully encourage you, to motivate you, to inspire you to be the best you need to be. This one is a little unique. This is Ministry Center. Many of you know that I serve as a senior pastor and administrative bishop. And I really want to talk to younger ministers, but I also want to talk to seasoned ministers. If there's ever been a time in our life that there must be a merging, a bridging of young and old, it's now. And I'm so honored to have some great men of God who, I'm just going to ask them, what do they see or ways we can bridge the gap? I'm so honored to have, to my left, your right, Dr. Arnold Williams, who works with me in the state office. He is over our ministry development. To my left as well, your right, is another powerful young man, a great young preacher, Virgil Henderson. To my left, your right again, is my present youth and discipleship director, Bishop Billy Gowdy. To my right, your left, a great preacher, great man of God. I watched him grow, the Bishop Kelvin L. Cabarrus. To his right, a seasoned man of God, church builder, church planter, the Bishop Purcell Sanders. Next to him, a young man that I literally have watched grow up, a powerful preacher, senior pastor himself, and Pastor Jermaine Reynolds. And next to him is another one of the great men in our state, Bishop Edison Nelson. And so I'm gonna just kind of throw it out there. This is a good time. Many people ask me, Pastor Pelt, how did you get into ministry? I share with you, it was a divine call. I had no desire to be a pastor. I wanted to be a deacon. And so I started off, gentlemen, how did you know you were called to preach? And anybody can jump in at any point. When did you feel the call, and how did you acknowledge the call? We'll start on this here. Bishop Williams, you want to start us out?
Well, I guess I looked and heard what you said. I never saw myself going into ministry, but God had me working with the youth for many years, and from that, it was a growth process with senior ministers who impacted my life, and then woke up one day and God said, it's yours, you've got to go. And so it brought me into ministry, and I've enjoyed it all these years and still enjoy it as a senior man, and believe that I can impact lives and have impacted many lives, and that will continue to do it as long as God gives me the ability to do it, and I thank God for that. And so I enjoy working with the bishop and with all these ministers here. I enjoy working with them over the years, and we'll continue to do ministry and hopefully pass it on to a younger generation.
Anyone else want to acknowledge the call? How did you come to knowing that you were called to preach?
For me, it was kind of natural. Grew up in church. Always was the original Sunday school boy. Coming out of New York, though, and coming into Florida, just started working with the young people and came up through the ranks through that. And so it's an honor to give my life back to share with other young men, with other young women, whoever I can help and assist. I was actually called to the elderly population more so, and so I worked the last 17 years or so with them while pastoring church. So, you know, it's an honor to serve, and God definitely has His call in our lives, and so we've answered that, no turning back.
Anyone else?
I guess I can chime in here. I'm a child protege preacher, meaning that from my very tender age, I knew exactly what I was called to do. 2 years old, I was preaching my first sermon at 5. I acknowledged to my pastor that I was called to preach. Everybody laughed, but he took me serious. And the very next night in prayer meeting, he put me behind a table and let me preach a message that was not so substantive at that time: drinking and driving kill a friendship. However, he took my immature maturity and helped develop and cultivate me into the man that I am today. So it's a child protege preacher, and I happen to be reared up by a senior man. So to answer the question, and even with this, with what Bishop Pelt is saying, how to bridge that gap between the older and the younger generation is that both generations need to respect the value that we bring to the table. Because the older knows the way, and the young man has strength. Putting that together makes ministry effective.
Anyone else?
I would say for me, I didn't want to preach. I wanted to play basketball, professional basketball. But every time I went to school, I would hear a teacher, administrator, or someone say there's something different about you. Didn't know what it meant at the time. Then I would go to church and I would hear the same sentiments. There's something different about you. I got my first opportunity to preach at the age of 14. And even then, I didn't see myself pastoring. It wasn't until 2013 when that call came to fruition and I began to walk in that particular calling as well. But it was something to where people began to speak into my life. Something's different about you. Something that's different about you, man. And I began to believe it, and now I'm walking in it to this very day.
You know what? I want to maybe segue, and I definitely want everyone to feel open. As we are now in this 21st century, what do you see one of the great hindrances or handicaps to generations merging? Have you heard through each of these testimonies to some degree that there seemed to have been a generational buy-in, but that doesn't seem to be the case today? Why is that? Why do we seem to have such a tension now between the ages? Anybody want to kind of jump in on that?
I'd like to say this about that. I've been privileged to be a part of this church all of my life. And my dad was a pastor in the Church of God. We're talking about in the 50s. And from there, coming out of high school in 60, it was my desire to do all that I can not to speak in a way against those that came prior to me, but all that I could learn from them and that I can do during my time, and from there, from generation to generation. And I think probably one of the issues we have is that even though there are those that maybe just come on the wagon, let's say 10 years ago, 15, but you got those like myself, I've been there all my, basically. But even at that, I think we've got to keep those who came along years ago until such time that they enter the grave, or whatever you want to put it, so that there'll be a connection for one generation to the. But I think what we're looking at now is we're too busy sometimes trying to show people what I can do, and forgetting the fact that there's a foundation was there before you even got here. And so we have to connect those years together. And I could talk a long time on that, but I've been in this church all my life, and I've been out on the field ever since. I mean, I say field, I mean pastoring, since 1965. Wow. And not only 65, and I have not been pastoring ever since then. And I've worked hard, and I've always watched the older guys before me, including the general church that we have, that we often worked in Jacksonville, where the general headquarters was. Well, I looked at those guys back in the 40s and 50s. They did the best they could do. But the fact is, to pick up where they left off, we had a problem. And so having been called, watching with my dad, it seemed as if the Lord placed me in a way not only to minister, but also to try to connect some of that. That's why I worked so hard to try to get to a new facility where we used to be. And in doing so, we're able to have a facility where the people may not be aware. We got our own facilities worth over $3 million. And over, in fact, about it with both churches, over $4 million in one city. And at the same time, we are not utilizing the facilities we have, but we're spending this, that, up. So my thing is, as a pastor, I think that there must be a greater connection from the past generation, the present generation, and at the same time, we know things changes as time go by, but there's a way it can be knitted together so that nobody's left out of this, and no one can stand here and say, well, I did this. Right. I believe it's this. I remember, and I'm going to cut off with this, it's what John Kennedy said. He said in his day, he said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I think the church could be the same way if we want really work at it. We're looking so much in one way. What can I do? And then when you, for example, my time is for basically most of my work is done, okay? But I can look back over those 50 years and I can show you pictures and everything else about how I work with the older guys. But we have to keep that going and not feel that It's my day now. Forget about you. We've got to tie it together, the past, the present, and the future.
Let me kind of come on, Brother Virgil, you're probably the youngest of the group here. How have you found, has there been an ease with that connection? Have you found that there is no connection, that you're having more conflict, that you're having, kind of talk to me about how you feel about just that concept, how we can bridge those gaps.
Personally, myself, I find it easier to bridge because I look up to older men. I understand how to listen and value them, and I respect. I think Bishop Kabir said it best: if you respect and you value each side, then you're on your way to kingdom assignment. So the older, more seasoned veteran people need to bridge with the younger. The older bring there's a quote I like: the older bring the young men up, because going there can't tell, been there, how to get there. The young men got the strength, the young men got that push. They can do other things. It's a different generation. There's stuff that they can do that older, seasoned preachers, men, don't have like the mindset to do, or don't have the capabilities to do, but they have somebody on their team that can do that. And so if there's a way we can make everybody responsible, hold people accountable, I think you're on the right track for kingdom mindset, kingdom building.
Say that quote again. What did you say? You say,
going there, can't tell been there, how to get there.
I like that. Listen, if you don't get nothing out of this, you get that one. Going there, can't tell been there, how to get there.
All right.
I'm going to use that in a couple of sermons. I promise you. I promise you. Bishop Gotti has one of the great jobs here in Florida Cocoa of being director of our youth department. And Bishop Gotti, can you share with me ways that we can use discipleship to bridge this gap of the young and the old?
Well, you know, one thing I think we need to pay attention to is the fact that every generation is different. I mean, you know, each generation is raised according to, you know, what's happening during their time. It tells them, you know, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, you know what I mean? And they just act on it, you know, they don't know, but they're just being obedient to their generation. And so the younger generation look at our generation and they say we're outdated, you know, and our generation will look up at another generation and say they're outdated. But the truth of the matter is everybody ministered to their time into their generation, and this is why Jesus kept talking about in this generation and that generation. So he spoke about generation. And so I just think, you know, the older generation, because they have the wisdom, have to take more time to father, you know, the younger generation, and understand that they are different and they don't have to do things you know, the way we do them, and not be intimidated. Of course, you know, they're immature in some areas, but God called them because they're strong, you know, they have the energy. See, it's this younger generation that's gonna run out and do the energetic things to bring changes. But, you know, our older generation is to give them wisdom and give them guidance, not to, you know, to fight, you know, against them, but understand that, you know, we're, you know, in a role to father them, to lead them, to give them wisdom, you know, and to know that, you know, they're gonna do things different, but that's how they're gonna reach their generation. I mean, you know, being a youth director, now that the youth convention is growing, so I'm having to change the way I do things, because there's other generations that are involved now. And so now I got the, you know, this young generation, they love a lot of rap, you know, hip hop style gospel, but the older ones like, you know, worship. And now that we're getting senior saints, you know, I got to make sure that, you know, I got more tradition. And so I got to mix up, you know, what I'm doing so that each generation can be touched where they are. And so we just have to reach them where they are.
You know, that event, the youth convention, is a perfect example of how we have, on some level, this marriage of generations. We got little kids, we got kindergarten, we got elementary, middle school, high school, and like you said, the seniors come. Bishop Barrett, let me share and ask you this. You have, and as a matter of fact, I even asked Brother Jermaine, and then I'm going to come to you, Bishop Nelson, because you could possibly put the end cap on something that you said earlier. Bishop Barrett and Pastor Reynolds, you guys have been in the school system and are in the school system. What are some things or some trends you are seeing that the church may need to capitalize, and we just may be blind to maybe start this conversation of bridging this generation?
The public school system has multiple needs. You have fatherless children. You have young ladies who don't have mentors, even mothers to look up to. You have children that are homeless. You have students that are struggling with all types of different things, and some of them are basically rearing themselves. When we planted our church in a school, it was ideal because the outreach was not something that we had to go door to door, because the door to door was right there in the campuses. The relationship we built with teachers, the relationship we built with students during lunch periods and after school and before school allowed us to assess the various needs of not just their academic support that they needed and mentorship to excel, but some of the social support that they needed, just some love, somebody to show up at a game, just say I care, and just to let them know that they were valued. From that, and I know Pastor Reynolds can really dig into this, from that we were able to bridge gaps because we were not just ministering to the students, we were also ministering to the faculty. And with that love that we were showing students and showing teachers who feel unsupported and feel neglected in their work, and the church was able to help underwrite some of the things that the district couldn't afford and that principal couldn't do. And as a result of that, that kind of balanced the relationships. We had teachers coming to church, students coming to church of various generations, and our ministry grew just from what we called a campus ministry. And we made that campus our congregation. So if that campus had 3,000 students, I had 3,000 members, and I pastored them as if they were a part of our church, whether they came or not.
Brother Reynolds, Pastor Reynolds, you actually do camps. How have you been able to, have you noticed generationally the changes from the time you started doing camps to now? And again, what are some trends you notice that churches may need to be aware of?
Absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed when you look at the school system is that with this current generation, they value relationship. They could care less that you're a bishop, that you're a pastor, or that you are a principal. Some of the principals get the business when they go out on those campuses because they failed to develop authentic relationships with students. And one of the things that I've learned, even with our camps, with our church staff going out there, our youth organization staff going out there, is that once you develop those relationships with those kids, you can tell them whatever it is you want to tell them because you've developed the relationship. We don't look at going out to the campuses as just another outreach ministry. We've coined it local missions. Just like churches and ministries put ministry dollars into going across the seas, we're going to put it in going on these campuses. Because if you look at the landscape of what's going on with many students on those campuses, they are godless, not because they necessarily want to be, but because their parents didn't go to church, they don't go to church, and so they don't know this concept of church or Jesus or how you are to behave when you're around pastors or whatever the case may be. But we know, but the only way we can be effective is if we develop authentic relationships with them. Once you develop those relationships with the principals, with the teachers, with the students, you can go on campus and do anything you want to do. And we tell every school that we go to, we're not coming here to convert kids over to Christianity. We're coming over here to develop authentic relationships with kids. Why? Because if you develop authentic relationships with them, they're going to follow you wherever you go. And when you go to church on Sunday, guess what? They're going to want to be right there with you because you've developed authentic relationships. And the same goes with bridging the gap between the younger generation and the older generation. Everything rises and falls with relationship. Now, you can tell me all day long, you need to have respect for your elders. You need to do this, you need to do that. But that does not resonate with the way we think today. We live in a technological age, so everything is instant and quick. And so, but once you develop that relationship, you can chastise me and discipline me because now I respect you as a father figure or a leader or something. Relationship is the thing that rises and falls with what we do at those campuses.
I want to be real clear, and as you've heard me kind of talk from a young perspective, but I also want to be clear that as we have some senior Bishop Sanders and Bishop Williams here, these men literally raised me. And one of the men around this group, he might not have said much, but he has serviced seniors. Bishop Nelson, can you share with me ways we can service seniors, that they know they're still vital to the relationship?
Well, I think dignity is important and preserving it is important. And it's on our generation that we make certain to respect those that are elder than we are. And so the Bible says that we should treat fathers like fathers. And so, you know, if it's a man, and even his wife, if he passes on, still needs care. And so the church has to play its part. My generation needs to play its part in taking care of our fathers. If we're not willing to do that, then we are not going to be cared for. And I think it's something that we're not teaching that, but you don't teach that by a textbook. You teach that by example. And so it would take those who are coming up now not to have somebody say they need care, but through observation to know that they need care and to just be there to be that support. And so that's pretty much what we've done with our lives. You know, we've kind of taken people into our homes and cared for them. And you don't walk around asking how you feel. You know
That's right.
that person is not up to their norm if they're not moving, if they're not whatever. And so, you know, if they need medical care, you take them for that. If they needed just to be out for the day, you put them in the car and take them for a ride. And this is stuff that's not taught, it's observation. So you become a part of their life. But if we do a lot for our senior citizens in this state. And thank you, Bishop, for honoring those. I was sharing with Bishop Sanders that you won't let our generation forget theirs, because you're constantly, it's a part of your conversation piece that we are to remember them. Bishop Cabarrus and they started the Sons of Thunder, and I was like, what is that, you know? Then I found out it's Bishop Chenault's sons, those that came up in his ministry, making certain to remember our generation that's going on before us. I'm sitting here with Bishop Sanders, and I'm learning so much about the Jacksonville story. And again, I'm a migrant from another country that went to New York, that came to Florida. So I'm traveled, as it were. And thank you, Florida, for accepting me after 20-something years. But, you know, it's good to be here and be a part of this state, and now to learn the historical context of what this state is worth. We don't put a value on what we have because we think about what we owe more than what we really have in our hands. And I think that, too, is concept. We need to be certain to say what the value of our people are. And I'm not trying to make this selective, but right now it is. And until we can accept what it is, we can't include anybody else, because we're still trying to find an identity. Our women's conference this weekend is talking about identity and the crisis that many of our women are in. But I feel as though men in the room, we need to set the precedent on that, who we are as a people group. And that's going to come from your vision, your casting. We are praying for you. And I think, well, most of us are on our state prayer line. I'll put a little plug for that. And, you know, I think that a lot of the fire that is in Florida now is coming from that place of prayer. And just channeling the change that is necessary, because we're not just talking about it. We're going to make certain we bring God's Spirit to the thing and make it happen. I've said enough. Shift that somewhere.
You know, listen, you know, part of my whole desire with Pelt's Pep Talk is to get to this level to where it's not just me. Many times you guys hear from me, and the reason you hear the stuff you like from me is because I talk to guys like this. But I want to challenge you, as we've talked today, that there's a generation that needs your help, whether it be young, whether it be old, and relationships are critical. And so here in this month of April, which is the month of Resurrection Sunday, will you develop a relationship? Will you go to a school? Will you go to a nursing home? If there's a senior in your church, will you put your arm around them and let them know you love them? And I promise you, if you build relationships, not only will you build relationships, but you'll see your pep and you'll see them do a better step. Listen, until the next time I get with you, keep on pepping, keep on stepping. And if you're part of the Florida Cocoa family, baby, you know how we said, we just love you because we Cocoa strong all day long. God bless you. Love you.